for inviting me to come and talk today about our experience at Brunel University London of implementing the Ethics Review Manager. I will just I'll talk to you a little bit about the structure at Brunel, how it got together, why did we want to move to an online ethics system, then I'll talk you through how we implemented it. I'll show you a little bit about the workflow, so how our workflow actually works, what it was like embedding the system, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the benefits as we've experienced them at Brunel. Do stop me and ask questions. I'm not proposing to take up a whole hour, so your questions will have to fill up my time if I'm being a little bit short. So Brunel is split into 3 colleges, and within those 3 colleges there are 13 departments. The college that I work in is the Business, Arts and Social Sciences. We have 6 departments in my college. We also have the College of Health and Life Sciences with 2 departments, and the College of Engineering, Design and Physical Sciences, who have 5 departments. All staff and students at Brunel are part of a college, so no matter what their other affiliations might be, with a research institute or a research centre, whether they're teaching or non-teaching, they all are a member of a college, so that the ethics system is all managed through the college structure, and it's managed within the college research offices. So my team is myself and 3 research administrators. In CHLS they have 1 research manager and 2 research administrators, and in CDEPS they have 1 research manager who is part-time and 2 research administrators who are also part-time. We also have support from our Governance, Information and Legal Office. I'm hoping that my colleague from GILO is actually going to be joining us later this afternoon so that she can answer any of the difficult questions that you've got. They provide central support for all ethics and governance issues across the university, but Kate Dunbar, who works in that office, has been the kind of figurehead for this project, getting it up and running and providing ongoing central support for us. And she's helped by another member of her team. So actually, in terms of the number of staff that we support, which is well over 600 members of staff, it's actually a relatively small number of people dealing with the ethics processes themselves across the institution. So why did we want to move to an online ethics system? I'm going to go back a little bit and tell you that in August 2014, Brunel underwent a major restructure. We went from 8 schools to the 3 colleges, and obviously within each of those 8 schools there were diverse local practices around ethics review, some of which were very rigorous, some of which possibly weren't quite so rigorous. Largely paper-based. Some schools have been using a sort of online system using our virtual learning environment, which we call Blackboard Learn. I know that other universities use the same one. But it was really difficult to track and get reports on the ethics applications and the kinds of activity that were going on across the university, particularly when you realise that in some cases a school had been split up across different colleges. So part of one school went to one college, part of the school went to another college. So within one college there might be 5 or 6 different systems for dealing with ethics, and that was certainly the case in my college, in CBAS. With 6 departments, we did actually have 6 different ways of doing ethics. So when you think we've got 13 departments, we probably had 13 different processes. So it was really important to us that we were able to bring them together so that we could have a consistent process across the university. There's lots of email attachments and filing of documents. Even with the online system that we had with Blackboard Learn, it was largely email-based, that people would email questions to each other. If more than one person was reviewing something, they would email back and forth and attachments, and people had to file things, and in a lot of cases we didn't have proper records of where things were kept, who kept stuff, where the paper was kept. The annual report that I had to make to our University Research Ethics Committee last year was an absolute nightmare to put together, because Post the restructure, people had found themselves in different jobs, so the people who knew where stuff was weren't necessarily even here anymore, and if they were here, they were probably doing a different job. And they didn't know what had happened to a big pile of paper that had been on their desk 6 months ago. So it was really, really important to us that we were able to consistently track what was going on and make sure that we were complying with the Concordat on research integrity and our own university processes and policies around research ethics and research integrity. Okay, so implementing the system at Brunel. Now I'll just say here that I didn't join Brunel until March of 2015, so I wasn't here right at the very beginning of the implementation process. But I believe it was October 2014 that Infonetica first came in to talk to Brunel about the system. But it really started in May with a first set-up meeting, and from then to our implementation it took us 10 weeks. So it was really quick. And one of the reasons that we had to stick to that 10-week implementation period was that we needed the system to be live by the start of the academic year. We absolutely did not want to start an academic year on one process and then have to move to another process in the middle of the academic year. For the students, that's just completely confusing and absolutely no-no. So we absolutely had to meet the targets that we had of when things were going to happen. So contracts were signed off in May. College research managers were given logins at the end of May 2015, and throughout May and June and into July we were testing and developing the system. Kate from our Gino office was very involved in making sure that the old ethics forms that we were using were translated through into the software, that we were asking all of the questions that we needed to have answered, and we in the colleges were familiarising ourselves with the system, trying to break it, which we did occasionally, and making sure that we were getting the system to be as robust and as useful as it could possibly be. And then we went live in July 2015.
Excuse me, Jo.
Yes.
I'm just interested in your testing and developing phase. How many people were involved in that, and how much time per week was invested into that process?
It was a relatively small number of people, and that was largely because we found it very difficult to get engagement from our academic colleagues to become testers of the system at the time. So it was largely the college research managers and the staff in our college research offices having a look to see if we could find where the flaws were and see whether we could break the system. And actually, I think we actually did a pretty good job, because whilst we've refined and we've changed and we've kind of made adjustments to the system since we went live, I don't think anybody has managed to break it as badly as we did back in June last year.
And this was a university-wide implementation,
Absolutely.
not just college-based. It wasn't phased.
The processes are all managed within the colleges, but the implementation of the system was university-wide. Because each member of staff is a member of a college, the ethics process is managed through the colleges. But no matter where your research affiliation lies, if you're doing a piece of research, you engage with the research system, with the ethics system in the college. So, as I said, the research managers, we were shown how to use the system at an Infonetica meeting, and then happily went off to play with it and do as much as we could to make sure that we were familiar with it enough that we could then advise colleagues accordingly. Our Gilo office, which is our Governance, Information, Legal office, provides reviewer training. They started providing that in early July last year, and we are continuing to run those sessions termly. So anybody who is an ethics reviewer has the opportunity to go to a training session, and that obviously will continue on an ongoing basis. The colleges actually worked together during July and August, particularly once the system had gone live, so that we were able to work through live applications together, so that all of the colleagues who were dealing with the processes in the colleges were familiar with what was going on and were able to answer each other's questions. And particularly over the summer when people were going on holiday, it was really important to all three of us as research managers that we were able to cover each other when people were on holiday, if there were queries and things coming out of the other colleges, that we were able to cover those. So we provided training for our administrators throughout August, and the system then became compulsory to use for all staff and all students. So undergraduate students who are doing third-year dissertation projects, postgraduate taught students who are doing dissertation or any kind of research, postgraduate research students, obviously, and all staff. So from the 1st of September 2015, any old processes were null and void, defunct. They were not able to use them.
Can I just come back to that question? Because were you spending about a day a week on it, or 2 days a week over that 10-week period?
Probably about a day a week,
Right.
I'd say.
And then
Something
into
like
the training period for students in September, would that have happened just say over a concentrated week or within every course? Or?
The training for the students was largely done by the ethics coordinators in the actual departments. So that wasn't done by the administrators, that was done by the academic staff in the departments. But I can talk a little bit. I mean, we now provide ongoing staff and student briefings on ethics and all ongoing support. So all queries come into the colleges and we deal with those ongoing. Oh, and I should say, of course, that we have ongoing technical support and liaison with Infonetica. They are very responsive, and we get almost instant fixes or changes. I know that my colleague in CHLS has implemented a slightly different process, which works much better for her college, and that happened very quickly, very smoothly. So Infonetica do provide us with continuous service, and yes.
Joe, I've just got another question just about that 10-week process.
Yes.
At the beginning of that 10-week process, was that when obviously when discussions with Infonetica began? No.
As far as I know, the discussions with Infonetica started in October 2014.
Okay. October 2014, and then 10 weeks later it was.
Well, the discussion started with Infonetica in October 2014. In May 2015 was when the contracts were signed and we knew we were implementing the system. We bought the system and we were ready to go.
Okay. So in October 2014, what was the response like from the faculty members, the ethics committee personnel? What was the response like? Because certainly I've been speaking to a number of people at lunch, and one of the most difficult things for people to accept is the possibility that they're going to have to learn a new system, and there's a considerable amount of behavioural change and cultural change that's required. I realise that you only started working into that period, but can you talk a little bit more about what other people's experience was?
So did everybody hear the question? Yeah, okay. So I can't comment on what happened before I joined the university, unfortunately, because and my colleague Kate hasn't arrived yet, but she would be able to talk to you more about that. The implementation or the introduction of the ethics system was agreed by the University Research Ethics Committee. It also went through our executive board at Brunel. So it was discussed at college ethics committees, at the University Research Ethics Committee, and then at a senior level within the university. So it was very much a decision that was agreed on by the senior leadership and all of the research ethics leaders within the university.
And was there resistance initially?
There have been pockets of resistance, and I might talk about that a little bit later. But largely, people recognise the need for something more consistent and more rigorous than we already had. But I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Okay, so our workflow, I hope this is relatively easy to see for everybody. So I've started here at the point at which the application is complete and signed by the applicant. Now obviously there's lots of work that can be done before that point, and one of the benefits of the system, of course, is that applicants are able to save their applications, go away, do some work on their consent form, their participant information sheet, or their description of their project, and then come back to it. So they are able to leave it and come back to it. They don't have to complete it all in one go, particularly on the more high-risk ones where they're completing many more questions. If it's a student application, a supervisor signature is required. So the supervisor's signature would be requested, and the supervisor's signature, once that's been done, the student will get an email confirming the supervisor has signed the application. At that point, so either here for a staff member or here for a student, the application then needs to be submitted into what we call BRIO, which is Brunel Research Ethics Online. I'm sure anybody else using the system has their own wonderful acronym for it. The system then routes it to the relevant committee, which is either one of the college research committees or to the University Research Ethics Committee. Now, at the moment, the only ones that would be automatically routed through to the UREC would be staff who are not a member of a college for whatever reason, perhaps a member of professional staff, or the very, very few researchers that we have that aren't member of a college. But we always have the option to refer applications up to the UREC if we need to. So if we feel that we're not able to deal with something within a college committee, then we are able to put it straight up to the UREC for their review. The college research officers then allocate reviewers to each of the applications, and what we do at Brunel, which I think may be quite unusual, is that we made the decision that for low-risk applications, the reviewers could be members of admin staff and didn't have to be academic staff. So provided they were properly trained administrators, they would be able to look at a low-risk application and make the decision to approve it. So in my college, all of my research administrators have been properly trained and are able to review low-risk applications and approve them as a matter of course. Obviously, if we feel there's something that we need guidance on, we refer them up to an academic member of staff. But for the vast majority of the very low-risk student applications where they're undertaking a survey or perhaps doing an internet questionnaire, then we're able to look at them and review them, and that does take a large burden of that kind of work from our academic colleagues. For medium high-risk
Sorry to keep interrupting, but where is that detailed in your workflow? So, for example, that decision, which is pretty fundamental, that's low risk, that's high risk, is that visible within the workflow?
That's part of our standard operating procedures for college research ethics committees, which was produced by our University Research Ethics Committee. So it was within our policies, which are available online to all staff and students.
But you can see it if you were to report on BRIO afterwards and wanted to look at kind of applications that were dealt with by the research managers versus the academics, for example, would you be able to ascertain that?
I believe we can probably run a report as to who reviewed each application, but it wouldn't necessarily, I don't think it would be an issue for us because it's the way that we work.
No, it's fine, it's a very good idea.
Yeah. So for our medium high-risk applications, they are all reviewed by 2 academic reviewers, one of whom should be a subject specialist or from the department that the application is from. That can sometimes be an issue when you have a limited number of reviewers in that particular department, and if the designated reviewer for that department is the supervisor for that student's application, then clearly it's not appropriate for them to review it. So whilst we do say 2 academic colleagues, that's always upheld. Sometimes that subject specialism might not quite happen, but that's certainly the aim. And as we get more people trained to review and engaging with the system, that will hopefully resolve. So the reviewers then add their comments to the application and send feedback back through to the college research offices. We collate any feedback if it's from 2 reviewers or from 1, and then either send out an approval letter if the reviewers are happy to approve that application, or we send out much more frequently, we send out a request for changes letter, which details the changes that the reviewers need to see in order to be able to approve that application. The applicant then amends their application and the whole process starts again. And of course, emails are generated at each stage of the process. So the student, for example, gets an email saying their supervisor's signed it. Once they've submitted it, they get an email saying that it's been submitted. Once a reviewer has had an application assigned to them, they get an email telling them that they've had a review assigned to them and that they obviously need to log into the system to look at that application. When the reviewer has sent their feedback back in, the research office gets an email reminding us that reviewer has now added their comments and that we need to go in and have a look at it. And then obviously the letters all get sent out by email. So it really does cut down on the paper-based version of this system. Yes.
I just asked about how you collect the feedback. We have the system as well in Kings. Do you use your reviewers use the little post-it for their comments and then the collation of that?
Yes.
Is that what comes back to you?
Yes.
And if you find that you get it back in coherent sort of terms?
We are very clear with our reviewers that we expect them, when they're putting in comments, to add the number of the question that they're commenting on, which helps us when we're putting those letters together to make sure that, for example, if two reviewers are commenting on the same question, that we're able to put those bits of feedback together. But yes, that has been a training issue. And one of our colleges has implemented a slightly different process whereby the letters are collated by different members of academic staff, simply because they deal with the more clinical applications, which can, the letters with requests for changes can go into many pages, and it makes sense for somebody to be able to do that. So, our experience embedding the system over the past year, we found that it was really useful to have somebody there to take on the system support side of it. So our Gilo team, which is my colleague Kate and her colleague Kalpner, now have a dedicated email box, which we call Brio Tech, and they are there for any system support issues. I can't log in. The system doesn't recognise my supervisor's name. I've tried to upload my document and it won't upload. All of those kinds of technical issues, Kate and her colleague Kalpner deal with for us. And we found that very, very helpful. It's obviously not essential, but for us it's been very helpful. The second thing for us, which was a little bit of a surprise, was the amount of workload that we sometimes encountered at different times of the year. We knew that there were about 500 undergraduate third-year students who were going to be doing a dissertation in our business school. And we knew that their deadline for doing their ethics approval was in November. What we didn't anticipate was that nearly all of them would do their ethics approval in February. So for the month of February, the four of us in my office were probably full-time on ethics applications from the business school, simply because they all left it to the very last minute. So for us, that's been a huge learning curve, and one of the things that we are making sure that we're doing for this academic year is communicating with our departments to understand what their deadlines are and what the numbers are involved in each of these modules that require ethical approval, so that we can work with them to make sure that those students are aware of the time it can take to get ethical approval, the requirements for ethical approval, and making sure that they're doing it in plenty of time, so that we know that we're not going to have to be flat out on it next February, hopefully. Another issue that we have during embedding the system is that communication guidance, you can send it out as much as you like. You can send them emails, you can put it available on your SharePoint pages, you can put it on the web, you can tell the supervisors about it, you can tell the students about it, but if they don't read the guidance, then they won't do it properly. It's absolutely key to get out there and talk to people in person. Putting it out electronically is one thing, but going out and talking to people, they understand it much better if you do that. One of our big issues, and this is one of the reasons that we had such a huge workload in February, is that the system means that supervisors can click the button that says, I am signing this application, without actually reading the application. Now, the system has a very helpful little list that the supervisor signs up to that says, I have advised my student about ethics. I I have checked that the relevant documentation is attached to this application. And they just go click, sign, and the application comes through to the research office and it says, there are no ethical considerations with my project, and it has no participant information sheet and no consent form. And you go back to the supervisor and say, you've signed this, you've said that there's relevant documentation attached. Well, how have you? Oh, well, I just thought I just needed to sign it. I didn't realise I actually had to read it. So again, this is a training issue for us with supervisors, and your question about resistance. We found actually that there are pockets of people, supervisors for whom the ethics process used to be, my student brings me a piece of paper on which they have written their ethics, I look at it and I go, that's fine. That's how the system used to work. The new system means that the university doesn't trust me. Now clearly, this is about a communication. This is communication from us. This isn't about a box ticking exercise. This is about making sure that the research that's undertaken by any of our staff, any of our students, is rigorous and is complying with all of those things. Yes, we have to make sure that all of that happens, but actually, it makes your research better. If you engage with the ethics process and you think about these things, it makes your research better, it makes your methodology more rigorous, and it makes... Kate's here, fantastic, she can answer all of the different questions. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing is making those supervisor responsibilities clear to them. And Kate's team actually is rolling out a suite of training sessions for supervisors specifically around ethics, their responsibilities and how the system works and what they actually need to be doing. But this last one here is probably the real reason that our workload in February was so huge, was the students didn't realise that when the supervisor signed the application, it didn't get automatically submitted through. So students were getting that email that said, the supervisor has signed your application, and they assumed that that meant that their application had been accepted and approved. They hadn't read the guidance, as I just said, they hadn't read the communications that we'd sent out, they hadn't seen the big red letters that said, once your supervisor's signed, you must submit your application. And I believe actually in that guidance there was a picture of the submit button, probably with a big arrow pointing to it. But anyway, so that was why we ended up in February with a large cohort of students who thought that they'd got ethical approval and then had realised that they hadn't. Now obviously that's not going to happen next year because we're going to be much more aware of it. But just some interesting stats for you. Since this system went live for us at Brunel last year, we have approved 783 low-risk applications, 343 medium-high risk, and 251 applications have been sent in that didn't need any ethical review. So 1,377 applications in just about a year, and of those, 1,086 were in my college. So I will be making the point to the university that 78% of ethics applications come through to my college, so perhaps we might need some more resource to deal with them next time. Okay, so moving swiftly on then, the benefits of the system. It's really easy to customise it and make changes, and we've done that. I mentioned my colleague in CHLS, they follow a slightly different process, but they realised quite quickly that the long clinical applications needed to be collated by another member of staff, and they were able to adjust the system to make that happen. And for those clinical applications with lots and lots and lots of attachments, it's really streamlined that administrative burden of saving them into folders, sending them out to people, storing them, emailing back and forth, and all of that kind of thing. When we have queries, it's really easy to look things up and have a look at what the original application said. And Kate's team, working centrally, are able to look across all of the applications in the college. So when we get those, all of the applications across all of the colleges. So when we get the students phoning us up to say, I submitted my application months ago and I've heard nothing, it's actually very easy for Kate to be able to look it up and say, well, actually, you haven't submitted it. I can see that you've been working on it, but you haven't actually submitted it. So once you do that, you'll actually get some feedback back. Obviously, we're using an awful lot less paper now than we were before, and that obviously was one of the main reasons behind getting the system in the first place. And it is really easy to use. I've had loads and loads of comments from people saying, it's really intuitive. I thought it was going to be really difficult, but actually once I started using it, it's absolutely fine. It's really, really easy to see what I'm supposed to do. And we are able now to have those consistent records that we weren't necessarily quite so able to get beforehand. And I'm not going to say terribly much more about that with a member of the EURECON over there. It's also flushed out some local processes, things that we weren't aware of that were happening before, and people now can't use those local processes, and so they're actually engaging with the university system as a whole, and that can only be a good thing. And it is giving us this really rigorous, consistent approach to everything. And as I said, I think it really is encouraging people to think more about their research in terms of how ethics can help them make it better, making their methodology more rigorous, making sure that they really know why they're using that particular group of people, why they need to do that particular intervention with them. And I think